What did 157 senators, congressmen, celebrities, businessmen, and journalists have to argue about in 1983? You should know. Join us this week for It's Your Business. What did 157 senators, congressmen, celebrity, businessmen, and journalists have to argue about in 1983? At issue, a year-end review, a sampler of debates over federal spending, taxes, deficits, interest rates, defense, free trade, deregulation, industrial policy, and, of course, politics. Join us, won't you, this week for It's Your Business. What did 157 senators, congressmen, celebrities, businessmen, and journalists have to argue about in 1983? You should know. It's your business.
From Washington, D.C., the United States Chamber of Commerce presents It's Your Business, a weekly series of debates on vital issues affecting you. And now the moderator of It's Your Business, Meryl Comer.
Hello and welcome to this special year-end review of It's Your Business. From a set now empty, normally bristling with debate, before looking ahead to 84, we'd like to offer you a sampler of 31 opinions on the debatable topics for 1983. Early in the year, the political question was, is this a make-or-break year for President Reagan? The economic question, what's left of Reaganomics? For a midterm analysis, my guests joining our permanent panelists, Dr. Richard Lesher, president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, were syndicated columnist and television commentator Pat Buchanan, Joseph Rauh, a founder of Americans for Democratic Action, and Jack Nelson, Washington bureau chief of the Los Angeles Times.
When you talk about President Reagan and whether he might be reelected, he may very well be. But you have to remember one thing. He still has a problem, and his aides know this, a problem of whether or not his programs are fair. And if you look at his taxes, there's no way you can consider them fair.
Capital expansion has finally begun. You don't see expansion taking place whenever you have a large recession on and when you're utilizing capacity considerably below 70%. But that capacity utilization has started to move up. The reemployment of people has begun to move up, and the investment has moved up. But even better than that, Americans have saved a great deal of money through a lot of those tax reduction programs, and so we're on the brink of the most bullish period in modern history if we don't go back to the Keynesian failed policies of the past.
The deficit results from the defense spending. I think I'm sick and tired of hearing people talk about deficits because a few people get enough to eat. We have a deficit in America today because the spending's gone up. The defense spending was too high under Carter. They ought to cut it. Instead,
Come on, Joe. Joe, get your facts right. Joe, get your facts right. Under Jack Kennedy, we spent 44% of the federal budget on defense, had a balanced budget. Reagan spends 26%.
Why do we need more when we can blow the world up now?
All right, but where is the Democratic initiative, Mr. Rauh, to change all that?
I don't think
with all the gains
Democrats
they've made
perfect. They're a little better, but I don't think they're perfect.
When we continue, the countdown is on. 26 opinions to go. Stay with us.
There are many ways to earn extra income or to start your own business.
Here's a few $1 million to help you get started.
Gee, thanks, Dad. Hey, let's face it. Most people who'd like to start a business don't have a wealthy relative. And that's what makes Amway a great business opportunity. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg to start. And it's a great way to earn extra income part-time. Just contact an Amway distributor and get the whole story.
The sun will come out tomorrow. Bet your bottom dollar that tomorrow there'll be sun.
There'll come a day someday when the sun generates more of our electricity. But until then, we need other ways, like conservation, coal, nuclear energy. Energy America can count on today.
I love you tomorrow.
Today is what gets us to tomorrow. Sponsored by the U.S. Committee for Energy Awareness.
The administration and Congress spent the year blaming each other for the $200 billion budget deficit projected for 1984. President Reagan's budget held out for higher military spending, lower taxes. In Congress, when it came to proposed cuts in non-defense spending, the issue of equity was key.
A freeze is intellectually dishonest because a freeze suggests that all people in the federal budget are similar. They're not. We've unemployed 11% of the people in this country. That requires growth in food stamps because those people are poor, they don't have a job, and they don't have food. Now, are you going to freeze food stamps, or are you going to accommodate the people who are in need?
Now, let's tackle that.
That's the question.
In terms of being intellectually dishonest. First place, through indexing, a Social Security recipient from 1965 to 1982.
The opposite of a freeze is not indexing.
Wait a second. Let me finish.
That's not the same thing.
A Social Security recipient ran 53% ahead of inflation.
No question.
That is, we now have a Social Security base which is 53% ahead of inflation over the last 15 years. Second, if you say to me, we have to make sure no one in America starves, I am totally committed to that. If you say to me, the only solution we in the Congress can invent is the current food stamp program, I'm not at all sure that the country's going to buy that. I think that's why I use the Chrysler analogy. I think we have enormous, complex, bureaucratic systems in this city that we are desperately trying to avoid changing. Medicare, Medicaid is another one. Defense is a third. And I'm perfectly happy as a conservative Republican to say to you, I'm willing to tackle reforming defense if you're willing to tackle reforming the welfare state. Now,
absolutely.
Now,
but that's the test that the Budget Committee has that it has never faced up to.
That's right.
Those proposed increases in defense spending, coupled with direct U.S. military involvement in Lebanon and Central America, heightened the year-long debate in Congress over how much military might was required to deter the Soviets and at what cost to the rest of the economy. Here's Congressman Les Aspin, Democrat of Wisconsin, and Congressman Dan Daniel, Republican of Virginia.
We need to build up the U.S. forces on a crash program and get to the full readiness that you're trying to as early as you want to, as President Reagan has proposed? Or can we take a little time, stretch the program out, and do as Jerry Ford suggests, very good idea, President Ford said, take the Reagan program that he wants to spend money over 2 years and spend that same money over 3 years.
Yeah, I don't know of one single credible economist, though, who will tell you that we cannot afford that the economy cannot accommodate the build-out.
By November, with neither Republicans nor Democrats looking to be pioneers when it came to reducing the huge budget deficits, Congress was left with only three options, none popular in an election year.
You know, I guess we could spend a lot of time blaming everybody for the problems we've got. But very frankly, I'm interested in a pragmatic approach that tries to deal with the problem we've got today, so that you can spend all your time saying, you know, it's got to be done all on the spending side, and somebody else can say it's all got to be done on the tax side. The reality is that it has to include all three areas. If you don't accept that, then you're kidding yourself.
In spending reductions, would you be in favor of limiting the cost of living adjustments throughout the federal budget, freezing them for a short period of time, and then capping them after that?
Sure I would be, but that's not enough.
No,
that is not enough. You're facing $200 billion deficits
no, I have a few
into
others.
the future.
All right,
I have a few others
all right,
for
but
you.
Senator Armstrong, isn't the notion if you're going to look for big savings, no one politically can afford to go into Social Security?
Well, we've just heard Dr. Lesher and Mr. Panetta say that they favor a government-wide freeze of cost of living adjustments. That, I assume, includes Social Security. And I don't think either of these guys are dangerous radicals. That seems to me a possible approach.
Would you vote for that kind of cut?
Yes, I would if it were government-wide. And in fact, the Senate has already on at least one occasion voted to do exactly that.
And we have to do it with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We have to do it with federal salaries, federal pensions, federal contracts.
Wouldn't work unless it worked across the board.
It's got to be fair.
Understand again that politically there is no way you can deal with cost of living increases on Capitol Hill and ignore the revenue side. It's that simple. And you know what's happening now is the president is opposed to cuts in defense. There are others that are opposed to raising revenues, and the Democrats don't want to cut entitlements. And as long as that kind of loggerheads continues up on Capitol Hill, you're just not going to see anything happen.
You may be right. What you're actually saying is that the only way you're going to get the problem solved is by getting people in those seats on Capitol Hill who believe the way the public believes, that it's wrong to raise taxes and it's time to cut spending.
Mr. Van Dyke, what about the notion of standby taxes triggered only if the high deficits continue?
I think when the proposal was first made, many people weren't ready to accept it or think it necessary. I think the degree to which the looming deficits remain and to which action has not been taken, I think it now perhaps is an attractive idea. If in fact President Reagan would come back and say, I reaffirm my support for this notion, I suspect he might find support that he didn't find earlier.
With all that debate and talk of year-end trade-offs, Congress put off dealing with the deficit, went home, waiting for them when they return in January, an even larger request from the Pentagon. In 1983, the result of economic deregulation also turned out to mean different things to different people. It was either chaos or opportunity. Debate heated up early in the year over the issue of affordable energy and decontrol of natural gas. We hear from Senator Howard Metzenbaum, Democrat of Ohio, and Congressman Phil Gramm, Republican of Texas.
But when all is said and done, decontrol, the Reagan administration bill, will mean that the consumers of this country are going to pay more, the oil companies will become far richer to the extent of billions of dollars, and unemployment will increase in this country. And for that reason, we all ought to be working to defeat the bill.
That's exactly what you said about oil, and exactly the opposite thing happened.
For the airline industry, rerouted into the uncharted world of deregulation, the transition proved nothing less than turbulent.
Airline deregulation was supposed to be all things to all people. It was going to promote efficiency. After all, we had the free market. They go on the assumption that a free market automatically means more efficiency. That's not always true. It was going to lower fares. It has in some cases, but there have been offsets. There are higher fares, too. Many airlines, as you said, have gone out of business. Some new ones have come in, but it has not been a smooth path as they hoped.
Well, I think what you will see is an industry with low fares, innovative service. You will constantly have changes, the introduction of new services to communities. There will be some flexibility in response to changing market conditions, but I predict that after a period of several more years, we won't even be discussing the question of airline regulation.
It's going to be healthy.
It will be very healthy.
Mr. Brown.
I think by the end of 10 years, you'll have an oligopoly of 4 or 5 major carriers who, by their sheer size, will dominate the markets, spaces at aircraft, and ultimately price. You will include a few tolerated smaller token services, but you have essentially carriers whose duty is to their shareholders and to their lenders with no public service obligation.
The expectation of our allies concerning a U.S. obligation to lead the world out of recession was made clear at the Williamsburg summit in May. In November, President Reagan paid a state visit to Japan. From the Far East, he broadcast a message intended for home as well as our Pacific trading partners, that protectionism is both defensive and dangerous. But it will require more than a presidential visit to correct our record $22 billion trade deficit with Japan, as seen in this exchange.
The Japanese are the most protectionist society in the world.
No.
You wouldn't. Who's more protectionist?
I think you could go through Brazil. I think you could go through Mexico. I think you could go
Among
through...
the developed countries, though.
I'm talking about among the industrial countries.
You might look at France.
All right. They're more protectionist than we are. How's that for starters?
That would be a tough call. I can't give you a straight answer on that
that's
without,
our problem,
without reflecting it.
Our own government can't even decide whether the Japanese are more protectionist than we are. It's clear to us who try to export lumber, that try to export beef, that try to export citrus, that try to export telecommunications. As a matter of fact, our government just came back and says they've made great progress on reducing those barriers. Obviously, they must think there's a problem when they talk to the public about reducing barriers, but here this morning they say they can't tell whether or not they're more protectionist than we are.
No, not whether. We have the freest and open markets in the world. I mean, let's be very clear about that.
Well, then you can tell they're more protectionist than we are.
There is a clear difference between the two, and I think we have a consensus on that.
Well, I didn't hear that a moment ago. That's what I really wanted.
The question is, how do you address those problems? Do you do the extreme, which I would suggest the domestic content legislation is an extreme. It would set off around the protectionism. It's against all the treaties that we've ever signed. Or do you do something like reciprocity, where you'd make it very clear to them that we're not going to tolerate this unfairness any longer, and we're going to have to move into closer agreement.
All right, but Senator Levin, you made it very clear, or we made it very clear in, I think, 1981, that we needed some kind of voluntary export quota from the Japanese in terms of autos. Mm-hmm. Are you concerned that this is a quasi-permanent status, or in fact the administration says, okay, folks, this is the last year you're going to have to put up with this?
My concern is that our auto industry is rapidly dwindling, and we're losing an industrial base in this country, which is going to jeopardize our security as well as our economic health, and we've got to do something about it. I happen to agree with Dr. Lesher that we've got to become competitive. That should be our goal, to become competitive. We've got to get government, labor, management talking together to reduce burdens, to offer each other benefits. We've got to try to figure out a way to increase productivity, to increase our competitiveness. I agree with that. That's our long-term goal.
When we come back, the debate over industrial policy, the minority view, and a political forecast. Stay with us.
Examine, if you will, 5 starkly simple words. Somebody still cares about quality. They sum up, as few other words could, the pride and promise of the family of naturally brewed beers from Anheuser-Busch. Care and concern for quality and tradition have made Anheuser-Busch the world's largest brewer, the industry leader by far for the past 25 years. And thanks to our loyal customers, last year we set a world's record by brewing and selling over 50 million barrels. You see, Anheuser-Busch still thinks quality is worth caring about. That brewing beer without shortcuts, without compromises, does make a difference. It always has, it always will. Brewing. Another dimension of the Anheuser-Busch companies.
Worldwide, throughout '83, countries were waiting on a U.S.-led recovery to help them out. But the facts and figures on the U.S. trade position with Japan and the rest of the world made high interest rates the culprit, sent out a warning signal about the overvalued U.S. dollar abroad, and gave the Democratic Party a debatable platform for the 1984 elections called industrial policy.
I don't think that our aircraft industry, our computer industry, and other specific important linkage industries are going to succeed against targeted opposition, even if we have good macroeconomics.
All right, but then whatever you call it, you're picking and choosing. Dr. Lesher.
That's my point, Meryl. If you go the route that the French and the British went,
you pick out a Concorde that no one will invest in, and you build that at the expense of billions of dollars on the backs of the taxpayers and see it go down the tubes.
But
Now,
that's not what I'm proposing.
What are you proposing then? How are those decisions going to be made?
I believe that the United States should have a policy that is conducive to investment in productive industry that is competing on a worldwide basis, and that if there are any edges, we've got to give the edge to our firms that are in that kind of global
But that's
competition.
picking. That's picking.
No.
Stan, let me make a point,
Well,
and I
it's
appreciate
picking
it. I appreciate your
manufacturing
comment
against-
about adversaries, because we're not adversaries. We have similar districts. You have Jamestown, which is an industrial part of New York, and I have Buffalo. So from that standpoint, we're not really adversaries. We both share the same goal. But in your bill, you have a national industrial, a development bank. That would capitalize basic subsidies to a tune of about $12 or $15 billion, another $25 billion of guaranteed loans. That's the same type of thing that Dr. Alperwitz is criticizing in agriculture, nuclear industry, and other industries. What Dick is saying, or what I'm trying to say, is that a policy in which we encourage by taxation and regulation and trade policy a healthier competitive position for American industry would do a lot more than just turning over to the type of subsidy program that would have to choose the Sun Belt over Buffalo.
That's not the last you'll hear about industrial policy, nor after a year's worth of scandal at the Environmental Protection Agency will this be the last you'll hear about the bipartisan commitment to clean up the environment.
The Congress and Mr. Ruckelshaus have made very clear to EPA that we want to make the investments necessary to clean up the environment. These are sometimes mutually exclusive public policy goals, but that's what government politics are often all about, is how do you bring those two goals together, and that's what we have to do.
This cautionary view on bigness in government and the American dream of upward mobility was offered by Wendell Wilkie Gunn, Special Assistant to the President for Policy Development.
A system that promotes individual freedom in order to provide upward mobility also has to be fluid, so that there's also the chance that some people will fail. Now, that's why I get back to this thing about big government. A lot of people think that big government really serves the interests of the powerless. That's a joke. When you set up an agency to restrict somebody else's freedom, that agency is there to restrict yours when it gets through.
In 1983, the slogan among feminine activists was, "We haven't come that far and don't call me baby." The ERA stalled in Congress the much-talked-about gender gap sent sufficient warning to both Republicans and Democrats that they'd best pay attention to women's issues. According to Dorothy Ridings, president of the U.S. League of Women Voters, as 53% of the electorate, women will be out voting for change in 1984.
I don't think there's any doubt that women are going to send a message to politicians, both Democrats, Republicans, and all those other parties combined, that it's the issue that makes a difference with women. It's the position of the politician, of the candidate on the issue, and not the party, and not all those other extraneous forces.
It's Your Business never strays too far afield from economics, politics, international trade, and social issues. But on this occasion, Ernie Banks, former Chicago Cub, member of baseball's Hall of Fame, talked the business side of pro sports and whether player strikes are now part of the game.
If it helps the players who gain better benefits, then we should strike. And I'm sure the fans realize, those that are real loyal fans, that this is a part of the game, and that people, the players, have their rights, and they must uphold those rights. And if it's a strike, they have to strike.
What did Mr. Wrigley tell you about the game of sports, baseball?
Oh, some 30 years ago, I had a nice visit with him, and he was telling me, he said, Ernie, you know, baseball is a wonderful game, but it's too big of a business to be a sport, and too big of a sport to be a business. And
in order to be ahead of the game, The American Public made Megatrends a bestseller in 1983. Its author, John Nesbitt, insists the best way to anticipate the future is to know the present. On this show, conservative Kevin Phillips shared his skepticism. We hear from both, followed by some very early political predictions.
Well, what's happening is we put more high technology in the society. We're more concerned about our humanity. So what's happening is at the same time we're getting all this high technology put in, we've got what I call high-touch counter-response. We're at the beginnings of a renaissance in arts and literature in this country, because that's where we explore our humanity, and that's the counterbalance to this incredible amount of technology. We're going both of those directions of high-tech, high-touch.
I think
as we get high-tech, it's not just people looking for high-touch, as it were. They're trying to grab roots of all kinds. They can be religion, religious fundamentalism, they can be populism, they can be a number of isms, and I think that that's a very risky phenomenon in this whole period, and it has been in the periods of great economic upheaval in the past.
I know it's a bit unfair, elections 15 months away, but we'll have some predictions about the elections or issues. Fred?
Well, I think Reagan will be reelected. I've always thought so, but he has some shoring up to do in his campaign. I think he has to make the right appeal. He has to appeal off the right agenda, the conservative agenda.
It's the Reagan-Bush ticket.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Jim?
Well, I predict that the Democrats will pick up 5 Senate seats, which will make it a tie, but the Republicans will keep control because of the vote of the Vice President.
All right. Dr. Lesher?
Well, as I said before, I think you can predict the economy, and the economy is going to be very, very strong, and I think the President will run strong. I think those people who believe in individual initiative, people from both parties who want to get away from big government, are the ones who will win.
John?
Walking the plank is really going to be tough. 15 months ahead. I'm going to predict that a Southerner will be the Democratic nominee for Vice President and end it at that.
That was safe. Well, when we continue, we'll have a personal note.
Alone at last.
But Phil, look.
Huh? Oh, that. Doris, I need the blimp behind me because...
Three's a crowd, Phil.
Phil may not know that Goodyear radials and their components have hundreds of quality checks behind them, but he sure likes the mileage he gets.
Doris will go a long way with the blimp behind us.
Get the blimp behind you. Come up to Goodyear.
I should have married Stanley. He just has a dog.
It's Your Business has a way of attracting opinions from its viewers. Strong opinions, pro and con, on the issues, the guests, sometimes even the moderator. But whatever your opinion, if you take the time to write, we'll always answer back. On one show, viewers backed me up when my role as moderator turned me into a traffic cop, and the year-long frustration with politicians who go out of their way not to answer questions simply got the best of me. The topic was the agenda for the 98th Congress. Watch what happened.
Bill, that's not true now, you know.
If anything,
just not
the
true.
president has demonstrated the bankruptcy of his own philosophy.
It's
and I
not
think
true
the
either.
first thing that we need to do is to correct the mistakes that he has imposed upon our country.
I hope that rhetoric like this continues.
Excuse me, you're not being fair to our audience. This is the same conversation we have held with the 97th Congress. I think people out there are about to turn us all off because they're concerned about what is the practical solution.
Right.
There are 12 million people out there unemployed. They hear congressmen and senators posturing time after time. Gentlemen, I have questions. Not one of them has been answered yet. Let's try to be specific. Let's try to give them information. People have to cope today. You are representing them. This is not the floor. We have exactly 20 minutes left. You're allowed maybe one of those a year. I did apologize to my guests. They said they'd come back, and we hope you'll be back. Next week, join us as we look ahead to 1984. I'm Meryl Comer. Hope to see you then.
This has been a production of BizNet, the American Business Network.